Hi people. So there's going to be some overlapping in these videos where I'm analysing the American election because there's just so much to say. We know what's happened now. Trump's clearly won. It's been described as a red wave, and it's hard not to see it that way because he's won the Electoral College, but he's also won the popular vote. Um, Nevada and Arizona are yet to be announced at the time I'm recording this, but probably Trump will get them. If that's the case, I think, if I've got this right, Harris will have won one fewer state than Hillary Clinton did in 2016. Clinton won Nevada, and it looks like Harris probably won't. Now, it's true that in some of those states it's quite close, but there's just no question about it. Trump has won this election. And I can talk all day about what I think of Donald Trump, but there has to be an honest introspection from the Democrats, otherwise they're going to lose in 4 years. I think, though, in a democracy, they're absolutely the right to continue to challenge Trump and Trumpism. Democracy has to have opposition, right? So, yeah, that's sticking up. But they also have to have honest introspection, because if they don't, they'll just make the same mistakes again. And Trump won't get another term because he's constitutionally limited, but, J.D. Vance might. Mini Trump, it's so they have to be honest about this. As I see it, there's several things. But the View, which is a controversial show, some describe it as toxic femininity or toxic feminism, they were saying that she had a flawless campaign. I think she done the best in the circumstances, but I wouldn't say it was flawless. There was a missed opportunity when she asked if she would do anything different from President Biden, and she said no. Now, she should have taken that opportunity to say, I understand lots of people are struggling, and this is what I would do regarding job security and so on. And I think that was a missed opportunity. Biden himself, this is the elephant in the room, it has to be said. I'm not saying it's an issue, but it has to be said. I think that when Joe Biden decided he was going to run for a second term, that was a big mistake. And frankly, I think it was a little bit selfish of Biden. I think history will treat Biden kindly overall. I think he had some significant achievements in his presidency, but the fact of the matter is his age was clearly on the wrong side of him. What he should have done is been content with one term, and therefore he was a transitionary president. I think the stubborn insistence on running again, even when it was clear, and I'm not just talking about that debate, just generally, when he turned up to the G7, he just looked like an old man who'd come out of a nursing home. And I take no pleasure in saying that, but it's the truth. Joe Biden is an 81, 82-year-old man who honestly looks his age, and it's a sad thing. I remember when Senator Dean Phillips, put out a challenge that he was going to stand against Biden. He got basically blacklisted from the Democratic Party. He was seen as a traitor. He was seen as an upstart. And this is not to say that Dean Phillips would have made much of an impact had he been the nominee, because he's not a well-known figure. But was he wrong? I don't think he was. All the Democrats turned on him, but I think had Biden ran, then the results would be even worse than what Harris got, potentially. Or maybe not. In fact, the margins show that Biden actually performed better than Harris in several areas. But that I think is a big thing. It made the Democrats look unsteady. It meant that Harris had a very limited campaign. Most candidates have up to 2 years. Either they're an incumbent president or they enter in the primary stage and have up to 2 years. Kamala Harris had about 3 months. I think when you're considering the scale of the American election cycle, that's just not long enough. So had she had longer, could she have maybe made more of an impact? Possibly. We'll never know. I would say identity politics is an issue. Now, to be fair to Harris, she did not explicitly say, vote for me because I'm a woman or vote for me because I'm black. She was aware of the history of it, but I don't think she campaigned on that. She did talk about bread and butter issues like immigration and um, and the cost of living. Maybe not enough. In this campaign, the Democrats focus heavily on the issue of democracy and Trump's character. Now, I think those are very legitimate issues. It is right to remind voters what Trump done in 2021. It is right to remind voters the character of Donald Trump. The problem is pointing that stuff out maybe misses the point that a lot of voters actually don't care. Or maybe it's a case of I've seen people interviewed saying they know that he says awful things, but they'll still vote for him. So if someone's struggling, they're putting what they see with Trump, rightly or wrongly, as economic security above his character deficits. It's almost like they're saying, well, we know what he is, but we'll just put up with that because he might be good for the economy. It remains to be seen if he will. And I think really, it's really for economists to analyse, but I think that a lot of the slack that Biden and Harris get on the economy is unfair because they were building on a lot of the problems that Trump created. I mean, he had record unemployment when he left office. His slow response to COVID certainly done nothing for the economy. So I think it's unfair to blame Biden and Harris for all the problems of the economy. But she was tied to that. So inevitably, as vice president, she was tied to a bad economy. It's very, very difficult for an incumbent party to win the presidency when the economy is bad. History shows that on almost every occasion, the candidate who is representing the ruling party over a bad economy will lose, and that's what's happened. Identity politics. Like I say, I don't think Harris really focused on that regarding herself, but media pundits are obsessed by this, and I think the Democratic Party as well. What I mean is they will focus on, for example, this assumption that young women will only vote based on their views on reproductive rights, or Hispanics will only vote based on dreamers and immigration. And there's these stereotypes, right, that are where demographics are put into a sort of pigeonhole where they're expected to vote a certain way. People are individuals and people are complex, and people vote for a variety of reasons. In the newspaper, I read a piece about a young black woman in California who had been a Hillary Clinton campaigner, and in this election, she voted for Trump. And that's why people just can't be pigeonholed into one expectation. Yes, you might find trends. For example, there has been more black men voting for Trump than Harris in this campaign, etc. So you will find trends, but I think it's a mistake for media pundits to obsess about this. They need to treat people as individuals. I mean, I know when you're trying to govern a country as big as the United States, 330 million people, it probably simplifies it to look into groupings, but that can be wrong. That can be mistaken. America does have some very serious social problems. Crime continues to be a serious problem in America's big cities. New York City, for a while, something was going right. It was the safest big city in North America. And once again, although it's nowhere near as bad as it was in the crack cocaine epidemic of 1990, it's once again got quite bad. There's been a situation where lone women are being punched in the street, and the offenders are frankly getting a slap on the wrist. I thought British justice was soft. New York City, it's like these are violent offenders, and frankly, you know, don't think I could be accused of race baiting, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of the offenders in these cases are black, and the victims are lone white women. Now, if that was the other way around, black women being attacked by white men, you could be absolutely sure Black Lives Matter would be staging angry street protests, and there would be a massive outrage, and it would be a massive story. I do think there are double standards regarding racism in America. White supremacy is rightly exposed and condemned, and I do think it is a big problem. I do. As a white guy, I recognize that and I think it's awful. But I will say something. I do think that black on white hate crime in America is massively underreported and underplayed. And I do think that there is an overt sensitivity on race whereby people, the progressive left particularly, they will microanalyze words over actual violence. So, for instance, they will say that the word thug, meaning a violent person, has racial overtones, but that they would spend more time focusing on that than actual crime, actual violence. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. The immigration issue, clearly the Biden-Harris administration has failed on that. They haven't given people enough reassurance. It's true that they promoted a bipartisan bill that Trump turned down, and I do think Trump's going to let down a lot of people. These grand promises to have mass deportations, and by the way, that isn't just criminals, that's pretty much everyone who's undocumented. Yes, technically they may have broken the law, but I think it is pretty inhumane to throw out grandmothers and children who are not violent criminals. They may technically have broken the law, but I think the Harris policy of an earned path to citizenship was more practical. I actually think a lot of Trump voters are going to be disappointed by this. Having said that, Harris should have spent a lot more time in border states. Um, Again, this focus on democracy and the abortion issues, they're valid, but immigration was a major issue in this election, and they underestimated that. In fact, I'm going to show you a cover of The Economist from earlier this year. This is when Biden was still a presumptive nominee. Just give me 1 minute. I don't usually like to go away in the middle of a video. I should have had this on hand, but anyway, here we go. How the border could cost Biden the election. Well, as we know, Biden didn't stand, but yeah, I think that will definitely be seen as one of the big issues. Um, I think all the criticism of Trump is totally valid, but I think the Democrats underestimated that a lot of people were prepared to put his character aside and focus solely on what they perceive to be him being stronger on policies. I don't think he is actually, and I think some of the charges, for example, the Democrats have been accused of elitism because they have all these celebrities. Well, that's a bit rich because, no pun intended, because Donald Trump literally has the world's richest man prancing around on stage beside him. I mean, what a mess this administration is going to look like. You're going to have Robert F. Kennedy, who's a conspiracy loon as far as I'm concerned, in charge of healthcare potentially. You're going to have Elon Musk with goodness knows what power in government. It's just going to be. I mean, what about people like Laura Loomer? Is she going to get a cabinet post? I mean, my goodness, that's so. It's not just Trump. There's some very shady people around him. But all of that, the fact is he has won this. So the Democrats can spend all day criticizing Trump, but unless they see why he has got the support, it's just going to happen again. Not with Trump, but it could be Trumpism, manifested in someone like J.D. Vance. If Harris stands again, and I think I don't know whether she will or not. The obvious argument is she lost, so why would she reassure voters a second time around? The only thing I can think of is maybe she'll be able to build herself up in those 4 years. There have been political comebacks in history. Trump himself, Nixon, maybe Harris can do it. Maybe she could really put herself out more. I think a big mistake in this campaign with the Democrats was that convention, all the focus on joy and optimism, and it was very much a party atmosphere. That was premature because, for people struggling, it looked almost mocking. I think they should have been a bit more serious. And also, far too many celebrities. Now, singers, actors, etc., they're citizens, they have a right to an opinion as much as anyone, but they are heavily pro-Democrat for the most part. Trump had Hulk Hogan and Joe Rogan and a few others, but let's face it, most celebrities are Democrats. So the problem with that is it does look elitist. And like I say, the Trump campaign, you have a billionaire president elect propped up by the richest man in the world, a mega billionaire, who has some very nutty ideas about a whole range of things. I mean, Elon Musk is. I think Elon Musk is quite a dangerous character. Actually, I think he's quite unbalanced. Some of the stuff he comes out with, I think he could be potentially be quite dangerous. Um, we're going to see some extremes in this government. I think the Trump administration is going to think it has a free hand. There's going to be sweeping executive power, and they have senatorial backing now, so it is concerning. But in order to fight this, simply condemning Trump and Trumpism isn't enough. The Democrats really have to win over the people who support Trump. It may well be that a lot of these people are going to be bitterly disappointed in 4 years because they'll see that Trump isn't God. He isn't going to deliver everything he's promising. Um, I mean, for example, mass deportations, even with Senate, even with congressional backing, it's going to be extremely difficult to deport 11 million people. That's going to be next to impossible. So people are going to look at that and say, well, he's let us down there. As for stopping wars, that's ridiculous. The American president's very powerful, but there may be things that happen in the world beyond Trump's control. What if, for example, Iranian-backed terrorists attack a US embassy somewhere? Trump will have to act. What if a new war breaks out in the Middle East? Trump will have to act. This splendid isolationism is all very well, but it's not realistic. And as for ending the war in Ukraine, we all know that probably means putting pressure on the Ukrainians to give up their country. It would be a grotesque betrayal of Ukrainian courage. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump panders to Putin's demands because Putin will flatter him. There is an argument that is unstable, like this erratic sort of stuff that Trump comes out with is it's useful not to show the enemy your hand, but I also think it disillusions allies. I'm not convinced that it's a strong move. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up soon, but I'm disgusted by Nigel Farage saying we should roll out the red carpet. Absolutely not. And Kemi Badenoch as well, dredging up old comments. I don't know why the British right think we should be subservient to Trump and America, frankly, because post-Brexit, any trade deal with the US, and it would be the same if Harris was president, will favour the US. It's a much bigger economy. So I believe in Starmer's reset with the EU. It makes sense that we have trade deals with France, Germany, similar-sized economies. But Brexiteers get so purist on this. Oh, it's a portrayal of Brexit. The tunnel vision that they have irks me because why shouldn't we have strong relations with our neighbours? It doesn't mean we're going back into the EU. We have to be realistic because any trade deal with America will be heavily biased in America's favour. Farage, Labour activists have been criticised for supporting Harris, but Farage gets no slack for going to Trump rallies. The hypocrisy is astonishing. But I would say, getting back to where the Democrats went wrong, I mentioned identity politics. I do think they need to move more to the centre. As it stands, they probably centre left. But I think, the far left within the Democratic Party do not win any favours. Talking about defunding the police and using divisive, toxic terms like white privilege will do absolutely nothing to win over Trump voters. Just won't. If you get a Trump, also the thing about condescension is important because if you get a Trump voter and they're not a white supremacist and they're not an extremist and they're simply worried about the economy, and you get progressive Democrats talking down to them and saying they're an idiot, they're a racist, etc., that isn't going to win them over. Now, having said that, of course there are Trump voters who are extremists, and I think it's valid to call those people out. There are absolutely militia nuts out there. There's oath keeper types here. Absolutely. And I think the Democrats are justified in calling them out. But they have to be careful not to be seen like they're calling all Trump voters that, because they're not. But I think it's legitimate to call them out. These people, these extremists, shouldn't get a free hand. And it's a disgrace that Trump has routinely pandered to them. He has said that the people who violently attacked the US Capitol, he will give them a presidential commutation. He's called them great patriots. Well, let's see if he carries that out. Because this is another dangerous thing with Trumpism. All the stuff he has said, he's going to have to stick to. And some of that stuff is downright dangerous. Because if he doesn't stick to it, his own voters will be unhappy. So all in all, I think it's a bleak outlook for America. He talks about a golden age. I could see divisions getting deeper. He claims he's going to be a president to unify. Let him prove that. Let him prove that. You know, in 1984, Ronald Reagan really had a sweeping take of the American electoral system. Trump hasn't come to that level, but yes, he's done well. So let him prove it. Let him prove that he can win over Harris supporters. I'm highly skeptical because he's such a toxic character that it seems hard to believe. I've on the issue of character, watched an interview with Fred Trump III, who's Donald Trump's nephew, and he said that his developmentally disabled son William, it was shocking. He actually said that I believe Trump was a guarantor. Anyway, Trump never met him, and he said, "Shouldn't those people just die off? Come down to Florida. You know, he doesn't recognise you. Just let those people die off." I don't see any reason why Fred Trump III would lie about that. You could tell the man was found it very difficult. I'll try and include the interview if I can find it again. But that's Trump's character. So what we've seen in America is people who are prepared to. Millions of people have said, "Okay, he's a criminal. That's fine. He incites violence. That's fine. He has come out with some absolute manure. That's fine in terms of what he spews out. He praises dictators. That's fine." All of this is excused. And remember, as outsiders, we need to remember that most American voters just don't care about foreign policy. In many ways, America is a very insular country, despite being such an influential country. But that's how I see it. If the Democrats were to just focus on condemning Trump and Trumpism, they're only doing half the battle. That's important, but they also have to be humble enough to admit that they got some things wrong. And I think they have to be honest enough to admit, for example, the far left are not an asset. Um, and simply calling Trump voters racist is foolish. Harris did actually, when Biden made that ridiculous comment about garbage, Harris did push back on that. And she said she doesn't agree with attacking American voters for who they vote for. So she said that. And there's another thing, the whole thing about, Puerto Ricans were infuriated by that joke. Well, obviously that didn't translate into actual votes. So there shouldn't be an assumption that just because there's some scandal or some outrage, that will necessarily translate as votes. From what I gather, a lot of Latinos were unhappy about it, but not quite enough to change their vote. I think the attitude was, well, we don't like that joke, it's in bad taste, but we're just as angry about Biden calling us garbage. Although I don't think he was actually doing that, but he put his foot in it. So, yes, I think the Democrats need to show introspection and humility. I give Kamala Harris absolute credit for her concession speech. I thought it was a strong concession speech, and she done something Donald Trump did not do. Jimmy Kimmel joked about, she would have to explain what concession means to him. It should never be forgotten this man lost in 2020, refused to concede. In fact, recently he said he should have stayed in the White House. He has won this time. Interestingly enough, for all his talk about stolen elections, he won. So, it's convenient when he wins, but when he loses, it's stolen. Well, which is it, Donald? Either it's corrupt or it isn't. Why is it fine when it works in your favour? That's an interesting point. Anyway, I'll leave it there, but that's what I think the Democrats have to do, to be honest about those things. And in 2028, focus less on identity politics and more on bread and butter issues.